I don't know if you've ever prayed before, if you've thought about prayer or been curious about prayer, but chances are if you have, it's been for one of two reasons. The first reason is the emergency prayer. You're in a circumstance or situation that you can't see any way out of. And so out of desperation, you call to a higher power, you call to God and you pray. The other reason would be the shopping list prayer. You want something so bad or you want something sooner than you're going to get it. And so the only way you see that happening is, again, calling out to a higher power or calling out to God, praying. Now, there's nothing wrong with these forms of prayer. They're extremely common, except for when we look at the life of Jesus. We see the way he prays and what happens when he prays, and we realize there's so much more. Yes, those prayers are fine, but there's so much more to prayer than sometimes we give it credit for. In fact, it can be so transformative, both to our inner world and both to our literal world. And that's what we want to just scratch the surface. That's what we want to explore over the next 4 weeks in the Transformation Trek. Welcome to the Transformation Trek, and as you heard, we are exploring transformative prayer. In both the Gospels, there's this story in both Matthew and Luke as the disciples come to Jesus. If you don't know what disciples are, they're his students, they're his apprentices, they're learning his ways. And they come to him and they say, Jesus, teach us to pray. And at first looking at that, it could be easy to think they're looking for some magic words or magic spell or the right things to say, or maybe they've never prayed before, but this isn't the case. We know that the disciples are good Jewish boys. They've seen people pray. We know that the religious at that time would parade their prayers. So they've seen prayer before. Probably their parents have taught them to pray. The difference here is when the disciples of Jesus see Jesus pray, they see something different. They see the world move. They see people's lives change. And so, of course, motivated by wanting to pray like that, wanting their worldview to change and be in line with Jesus's, they say, Jesus, teach us to pray. What a fascinating way to see or start exploring prayer. Not as a way of getting something or getting out of a situation, but as a way of transforming ourselves and the way we see the world, and transforming others, and then transforming our literal world. Talking to God, partnering with him. Not equal partners, he's God, he's going to do the work, but participating with the divine. And so that raises the questions we're going to ask. And they're simple questions, but they're important questions to start us off this week of exploring prayer. It's questions like, what do you pray for? Is it just the shopping list prayer where you're asking for things and asking for things that you need? And was that the only time you talk with God? Totally fine, but there's so much more. Or is it only when you get stuck, when you're in emergencies, you kind of remember that you have that emergency button in your pocket, you have prayer, and so you let out a prayer then? Is that the only time that you communicate with God? What do you pray for? What brings you to prayer? Some great questions to ask of yourself, and if you're watching this with others, to kick that around. What brings you to prayer? And the next question is, what type of things do you pray for? What type of things are on that list or in that emergency? What type of things do you pray for? And then when you look at the verses, when you look at the way Jesus prays and the other verses out of Psalms 100, when you look at those two prayers, how do they differ from the way you pray? For the people in your group, how do they differ from the way you all pray? What could you learn from Jesus in how he prays? What could he teach you? And what would it mean in this season to ask God to teach you to have a heart of prayer? What would it mean if prayer could do more than just get your stuff or get you out of a situation? It can do that, but what would it mean if prayer actually changed the very way you see the world? What if prayer was transformative for you and everyone else? What if you prayed for God to have that type of prayer, to show you how to pray like that? That's what we want to explore this week as we start to unpack this practice of transformative prayer.